Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into the fascinating architecture of a scene by unpacking a highly detailed piece of visual direction. We'll explore just how much absolute power can be packed into a few short sentences. And to do that, we're looking at one specific text that perfectly bridges the gap between hard science and vivid imagination. So, here's a question for you. How do you transform the periodic table into a heartwarming animated world? I mean, it sounds like a total paradox, right? Normally, when we think of chemical elements, we picture sterile labs, complex equations, rigid charts, definitely not warm sunlight and cheerful characters. But today, we're looking at a source text that does exactly that. It takes the literal building blocks of matter and turns them into something with a pulse, a personality, and a genuinely beautiful visual aesthetic. Just listen to this exact visual direction. A beautiful fantasy village at sunrise. 3 human-like characters inspired by chemical elements stand together. It goes on to describe sodium, chlorine, and potassium, and then wraps up with some very specific stylistic commands. I want you to treat these 72 words not just as a paragraph, but as a concentrated masterclass in concise visual direction. Literally every single word here is pulling its weight to construct a very specific image in our minds.
All right, let's get into Section 1, Blueprint of a Fantasy Scene.
Think of this source text exactly like an architectural blueprint. It's a foundational set of instructions used to systematically construct an environment, cast the subjects, and direct the camera style layer by layer. When you read those sentences, you aren't just reading a story, right? You're reading a set of highly specific instructions for building an imaginary movie set. If you were a film director, this is the exact vision you'd hand straight to your art department. So let's look at the very first layer of this construction. Moving on to Section 2, Setting the Warm Golden Stage. A beautiful fantasy village at sunrise, bathed in warm golden sunlight. Notice how these specific phrases immediately establish this idyllic, welcoming mood. The author didn't just say a town outside. No, they specified a fantasy village, which instantly implies a certain charm and scale. They specified sunrise and warm golden sunlight. This is crucial because it dictates the lighting rig of our imaginary scene. It tells us the shadows are going to be long, the contrast is soft, and the overall emotional tone is just really hopeful and warm. This really shows how sensory details stack on top of one another to build a vibrant aesthetic. Colorful cottages, green trees, flowers, warm golden sunlight. In just a handful of words, the background is completely filled out. You can almost feel the temperature of the air and smell those flowers. The stage is perfectly set, it's completely inviting, and it's totally ready for our subjects to arrive. Now for Section 3, Personifying the Chemical Elements. The author systematically breaks down these characters, mapping out exact traits for each element. For sodium, chlorine, and potassium, the text dictates a persona, a clothing color, and an emblem. So, sodium is a cheerful young man in bright yellow with a glowing Na emblem. Chlorine is a graceful young woman in elegant green with a subtle Cl symbol. And potassium is a confident young man in royal purple with a glowing K emblem. It's just a perfectly balanced trio. But notice how this builds contrast within the scene. The text deliberately sets up sodium and chlorine with distinct, almost opposing energies. Sodium has this loud, bright, and cheerful vibe. He's wearing bright yellow and his emblem is glowing. It's very high energy. Directly against that, we have chlorine. Her description uses words like graceful, elegant, and her symbol is specifically noted as subtle. This contrast is brilliant because it ensures that when these characters stand together in our imaginary frame, they don't just blend into one another. They are distinct, readable individuals. And then, of course, potassium completes the trio. The text describes him as a confident young man in royal purple clothing with a glowing K emblem. The descriptor royal purple is doing a ton of heavy lifting here. Combined with the word confident, it reinforces a commanding, stable presence that totally grounds the energy between the cheerful sodium and the graceful chlorine. Our cast is now fully realized, directly inspired by chemistry, sure, but entirely human in their appeal. Which brings us to Section 4, Rendering the Pixar Aesthetic. The text ends with a string of highly specific commands. We can actually break these down into 3 logical steps that dictate the camera and render style. First, it sets the artistic style by declaring Disney Pixar style. Second, it determines the medium by specifying 3D animation. And third, it maximizes the fidelity with terms like ultra-detailed, high-quality, and 8K. These aren't just throwaway words, folks. They are the stylistic filter through which the entire scene absolutely must be viewed. These specific technical tags are real game changers.
Cinematic lighting connects right back to that warm golden sunrise we discussed earlier, ensuring that the light isn't flat but dramatic and beautifully rendered. Expressive Faces guarantees that the cheerful, graceful, and confident personas of our chemical trio are physically visible in their actual features. By tagging it with 3D animation and 8K, the text forces a transition from a mere concept into a polished, high-fidelity visual. It tells our imagination exactly how to render the final frame.
Finally, Section 5, the final cinematic vision.
72. That is the exact number of words in our source text. Just 72 words. But as we've explored today, those 72 words perfectly synthesize an environment, a complex cast of subjects, and a highly specific artistic style. It is just incredibly efficient. It proves that you don't need pages and pages of heavy exposition to create a vivid, ultra-detailed world. You just need a clear, structured blueprint.
And that leaves us with this final thought. If just a few carefully chosen sentences can construct a brilliant 8K world where chemistry literally comes to life at sunrise, what universe will you write next? The power of structured text is absolutely limitless. I really hope this explainer inspires you to look at text not just as words on a page, but as actual blueprints for your imagination. See you in the next one.